All right, so let's dive into this idea that, at first glance, can sound, well, pretty out there. It's called the Angelic Fall Theodicy. The basic idea? That all the brutality we see in the natural world, what some call natural evil, is actually a consequence of the fall of angels. Now, I know it might sound a little speculative, but it's actually a surprisingly tough theory that offers a really compelling answer to a problem that's thousands of years old. So let's explore this idea together.
Wow. This quote from Annie Diller just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures this tension we all feel. The natural world is filled with such breathtaking beauty, but also just incredible brutality. And it leaves you with this profound question. How could a good and loving God create a world that looks like this?
Okay, so here's the plan. First, we're going to really define the problem itself. Then, we'll look at why some of the usual answers just don't feel like they quite fit. After that, we'll unpack the angelic fall hypothesis, explore the kind of old-school worldview that makes it all click, and then finally, think about how this idea might just re-enchant the way we see the world around us.
So, first things first. We really have to get our heads around the full weight of this problem. Because this isn't just about human suffering. This is about the unbelievable scale of animal suffering that went on for millions and millions of years before a single human being was ever on the scene.
So when we say natural evil, this is what we're talking about. It's not just that animals die, it's the whole system. You've got diseases, genetic mutations, the constant brutal competition for resources, and just massive amounts of extinction. The huge majority of species that have ever lived are gone. It can feel so wasteful and just deeply, deeply wrong. And the timescale here is just mind-bending. Think about it like this. If you squeezed all of Earth's biological history into a single 24-hour day, all of human history would be just the last 2 seconds before midnight. That timeline alone makes it really, really hard to blame all of this on the human fall.
And yeah, this famous line from Tennyson pretty much says it all. It's become the go-to phrase for this brutal reality. It just perfectly captures that feeling of nature as this constant, bloody fight for survival. This is the big dilemma that any real explanation has to face.
So, okay, how have people tried to answer this? Let's jump into our next section and take a look at why some of the more traditional responses can start to feel a little thin when you put them up against the sheer scale of all this pre-human suffering. So, at the most basic level, Christian answers usually go down one of two roads. On one hand, you have fallenness theodicies. These are all past-focused. They see suffering as a result of something bad that happened in the past, like a fall. On the other hand, you have developmental theodicies. These are future-focused. They argue that all this suffering is just a necessary step in a process that's leading to some greater good.
So here's the thing. Each of these common answers runs into some pretty big problems. Some folks say, well, animals don't really suffer, but that just feels wrong, doesn't it? Especially when you look at a dog or a chimp. Others will say it's just the price you pay for having consistent physical laws. But a skeptic can just turn around and ask, well, why did God have to make these laws? And of course, blaming it all on Adam and Eve runs smack into that massive timeline problem. At the end of the day, a lot of these answers risk making evil seem normal, or worse, making God the one who created it.
And that brings us to the main event. The angelic fall hypothesis. It's this really fascinating idea that takes two classic Christian beliefs, mashes them together, and offers this powerful, a little provocative alternative for this ancient problem. And really, the whole hypothesis boils down to two simple steps. Step one, it starts with the traditional belief that some angels rebelled against God and became demonic forces. Step two, it suggests that this evil isn't just some abstract idea. It's a real, corrupting force that actively messes things up, introducing disorder and decay into the created world. Now, this is a really important point. The theory isn't necessarily saying you should picture demons actively going out and, tripping a specific gazelle. It's more about an indirect impact. The idea is that the fall of these incredibly powerful beings tore a deep hole in the very fabric of creation itself. And all this other chaos, predation, disease, decay, just flows out of that original corruption. And look, while it might sound a little strange to us today, this is not some brand new fringe idea. It was seriously proposed way back in the 19th century as a way to deal with the new discoveries about Earth's deep history. And it's been taken seriously by some of the sharpest Christian minds out there. We're talking C.S. Lewis, major philosophers like Alvin Plantinga, and influential theologians. It's a surprisingly resilient idea.
So why does it sound so strange to us? Well, to get it, we kind of have to step back in time and recover a totally different way of looking at the universe. What you might call a classical Christian imagination, a world that isn't an empty machine, but is just buzzing with spiritual agents.
Let me ask you a simple question. What is a star? I mean, our modern answer would be, a giant ball of flaming gas. But the classical worldview had a very different, and you could argue a much richer answer.
And there it is, that quote from C.S. Lewis's Voyage of the Dawn Treader. That one line just perfectly nails the shift in how we see things. The physical stuff isn't the whole story. In this older view, the physical world has this deeper spiritual reality behind it, animating it, giving it meaning. A star is not just what it's made of.
The great theologian Thomas Aquinas put it about as plainly as you can. He didn't see the universe as two separate boxes, the physical stuff over here and the spiritual stuff over there. For him, it was one single, unified cosmos, where angels and physical things were completely intertwined.
And once you understand that classical worldview, you can start to see how it contrasts with our modern one. And suddenly, an idea like the angelic fall goes from seeming totally bizarre to, making a whole lot of sense. See, the modern view so often sees a barren cosmos, just matter, energy, and impersonal laws. But the classical view saw an enchanted universe, a living cosmos, where the physical world is held up, directed, and governed by spiritual beings, by angels. And if you live in that kind of world, the idea that the fall of those spiritual governors would have a catastrophic effect on the physical world they oversee, that's not a weird leap. It's a logical consequence.
But okay, is any of this actually biblical? Well, while you won't find the theory spelled out in a single verse, all the key ingredients are there. Think about it. The Bible never actually explains where the serpent in Genesis 3 came from. Satan is given titles like the ruler of this world, which implies some kind of dominion. And all through the Gospels, you see demons causing real physical problems like blindness and paralysis. So that core idea that fallen spiritual beings can corrupt physical reality is a deeply biblical theme.
So at the end of it all, we're left with this question. Is the Angelic Fall Theodicy just a bizarre speculation? Or is it a compelling, resilient answer to one of the deepest and most painful questions of faith? Maybe at the very least, it's an invitation to recover a more enchanted view of our world. A world where the stars are more than just what they're made of, and where the deep groaning of creation points to a story that is far older and far stranger than we ever imagined.